When the Torah addresses and talks about the road to perfecting yourself, it doesn't say you need to find a prophet. The Torah actually says the answer lies within. It's not in the heavens. We don't need to accept anybody. It doesn't require the Messiah. It doesn't require a major amount of scholarship. This really leads to a fundamental difference between Judaism and Christianity in particular. Not only in the understanding of original sin, but really the concept of sin itself. And it all begins with that question of when did the sin of eating from the tree of knowledge take place? My name is David Bashevkin. I am the host and founder of 1840, which is a Jewish multimedia organization, and I am a professor and a Rebbe at Yeshiva University. I actually wrote not one, but two books on sin. The first book I wrote on sin is in Hebrew, and it is called Berogez Rachem Tizkor. In your anger, remember mercy. The second book is, thank God, in English. It's called Sin a Gogue, Sin and Failure in Jewish Thought. Buy both online. Check them out. To understand the concept of sin, and we have to understand the word sin is not a Hebrew or a Jewish word. But to understand what that concept represents within the context of Judaism, we really need to begin with the first story of sin. The first story of sin happens right at the beginning of Genesis in the 3rd chapter. What essentially happens is God instructs Adam, you can eat from all of the trees of the garden, but you cannot eat from the tree of knowledge. And then Eve goes ahead and is seduced or is prompted by the snake, and she eats from the tree, and then she gives Adam to eat, and then they're banished from Eden. People ask, why did Adam sin? People ask, how could Adam have sinned? He was just created. He interacted, so to speak, with God. People can ask, what exactly was the sin? The word sin is not mentioned in the entire story. What exactly did he do wrong? I want to present a different question because I think it's the most fundamental question of Judaism. When does this story take place? I was actually at a conference, believe it or not. It was a conference of different religious leaders from different traditions all talking about their understanding of sin and failure. And I presented this to the conference and I said one of the most central ways in which we need to understand sin is really the dating of the original sin, so to speak. What's known in Christian circles as the original sin, but we could call it the first sin. And I said, in the Jewish tradition, we date this on the 6th day of creation. It happened on a Friday. And a Christian scholar got up and said, that's impossible. I said, why is that impossible? He said, look at what God says at the end of the 6th day. He said, not only was the day good, God says his creation of the 6th day was tov me'od, very good. Very good. The Christian scholar asks, how could God call a day where he's looking at the downfall of man and the original sin in their doctrine, how could he call that very good? I said, that's a very good question. One possibility is that this sin took place after the creation story. God creates the world 7 days, and a plain reading of the text of the Torah would actually suggest this took place after creation. And we have to pay attention to the plain meaning of the text because we are told in a principle that the Torah's plain meaning, even though we have rabbinic interpretation and we have so many traditions and mystical interpretations, the plain meaning always stands. In this understanding, God creates a perfect world, and it is man who destroys that perfection of the world. Believe it or not, this is the Christian reading of the story of eating from the tree of knowledge. The Jewish tradition is much different. We have a deliberate tradition that dates the eating from the tree of knowledge not after creation, but as a part of creation. That on Friday, the 6th day of creation, before Shabbos, is when this story took place. This really leads to a fundamental difference between Judaism and Christianity in particular. That fundamental difference is really not only in the understanding of original sin, but really the concept of sin itself. And it all begins with that question that we mentioned earlier of when did the sin of eating from the tree of knowledge take place? In a Christian reading of that text, God made the world perfect and man corrupted God's perfection. And in Christianity, the way that they understand it is that the only way that we can perfect the world, because God created a perfect world, the only way to bring about perfection is through God. And their notion of God through their Savior, this is not what we believe, but their Savior in Jesus. In the Jewish reading of that text, God created the world, and a part of creation itself was that imperfection, was the capacity to fail, and therefore our mission is to perfect the world, to bring it to a future-oriented, redemptive state. The redemptive state in Judaism is always in the future. It's not in the past. We do not believe that we need a divine intermediary in order to bring ourselves closer to perfection. In fact, a central notion in perfecting sin is the idea it is not in heaven. Lo bashamayim hi. When the Torah addresses and talks about the road to perfecting yourself, it doesn't say you need to find a prophet. It doesn't say you need to find the biggest rabbi in the world. The Torah actually says the answer lies within. It's not in the heavens. We don't need to accept anybody. It doesn't require the Messiah. It doesn't require a rabbi. It doesn't require a major amount of scholarship. Teshuva and the way that we heal from sin, even in the very word, is not about going outwards. It's not about ascending to the heavens. The very word teshuva, which is how we heal sin, comes from the word shave, which means to return. To return to where? To return back to our true selves, our true purpose, our true mission in this world, which is that every single person in the world has their own mission and their own spark of divinity that they're supposed to bring out. And we make mistakes. Our capacity to do the wrong thing is the very capacity that allows us to perfect and to heal. It's the same creative energy that we have, that every human being has. And in the Jewish approach to Teshuva is really returning inward, finding and clarifying what that inner spark of divinity that it is our purpose to bring out and share with the entire world. This really gets to the heart of the question, are human beings inherently good or inherently bad? This question really emerges in a very classic Talmudic story when Moshe, the chief educator of the Jewish people, the greatest prophet of the Jewish people, goes to receive the Torah, goes up to Mount Sinai for that moment of revelation, and he spends 40 days and 40 nights speaking with God and receiving revelation, so to speak. In that story is something wild takes place. There is a group who do not want God to give the Torah to Moshe. Why don't they want? And who's that group? It's not a group of rabble-rousers. It's not a group of people online. It's not politicians. It's not anti-Semites. It's angels. The Talmud tells us the angels did not want Moshe to receive the Torah. They said the Torah is the supreme wisdom of the divine. How are you going to give this to humanity? They don't deserve this. They don't deserve something so sublime, so incredible, and so lofty. The angels themselves said, we are divine. Keep this divine revelation with us in these transcendent worlds. And God says something incredible. God says, yeah, open up, see what it says inside of this document. See what it says inside of the Torah. Inside of this Torah, it says, do not murder. It says, do not steal. Do not be jealous. Looks at the angels. Are these things that you struggle with? The angels say, no, this is not what we do. So God says this entire notion of divinity, the entire concept of revelation is coming to bring us closer to perfection. Angels are already living in that static world. There is no room for growth. They don't have any desires to create, desires to make things better or worse. They're just static. Humanity is dynamic. The reason why we, the Jewish people, receive the Torah is not because we are perfect. It's because we're imperfect. It's because our mission in life and in existence is to bring perfection and divinity to this world. So when people ask, are human beings, are they good or are they bad? I said, the beauty of human beings is that we're dynamic, is that we have the capacity to do both. And our mission in our short life and existence on this earth is not to be perfect, but to bring perfection, to bring the world a little bit closer to its ultimate divine purpose. A question that many people have is it always possible to do Teshuva? Sometimes we feel this in our own lives, where we feel so distant and so broken that there is no way back. There's no way to return. We feel sometimes that we are lost. This feeling is the pain of the blockage of what sin can create. God forbid, everyone has a way back. Sometimes these voices and these divine signs come out that convince us that we are already lost. But no Jew is ever completely lost. The Talmud, in fact, tells us in the very end of Tractate Sanhedrin, it says something really amazing. The Talmud gives a list of people who lose their share in the world to come. The Talmud says that everyone has a share in the world to come, except, then there are a bunch of exceptions, ways that you could lose your share in the world to come, mistakes that you could make that seem so irreparable and so irredeemable that you're lost. And there are people who read that and say, I may have violated that or that. My life is so broken, is so lost. I can't even find the road back. I can't even see the shoreline. I'm so out to sea. I'm so submerged in my own sin and my own filth. There's no way back. If you flip a few pages in the Talmud at the very end of Tractate Sanhedrin, it quotes the Dorshei Rishumos. The Dorshei Rishumos literally means to darash is to interpret. Rishumos, Rishima means the remnant. The last remnant that is within us. And that says, the Dorshei Rishumos, those who interpret the remnant. What remnant? The remnant within each of us say, no matter what, everyone has a path and a place in the world to come. Why are they saying that? What they are reminding everyone is that everyone has a way forward. No one is completely lost, because it gets back to the very idea, the very Jewish conception of sin itself. The way that we are trying to perfect the world is not to go back in time and to make it as if I never made the mistake before, to get everything back to perfection. Perfection doesn't exist in the past. Perfection only exists in a future-oriented way. And it needs to come through us, that perfection. So no matter how far, how distant, how broken, how hopeless, and how irredeemable someone may feel, there is always a next step forward. There is always a place where no matter how distant and how broken, and people can mess up their lives in really traumatic and wild ways, and it's heartbreaking. But no one is ever so lost that they don't have one step forward. Our purpose is to find that next step from wherever we are, as broken as that place may feel. There's one step forward that's going to bring us and the entire world closer to divinity. And there's a passage of Talmud in Tractate Brachos, which is the first tractate of Talmud, that I have always found so deeply moving. It's a story of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, who was a rabbi who had a study hall. And he was going to the study hall and he saw one student who was stuttering, who was not speaking. properly. It wasn't flowing. And it was just like he could sense that this child who was studying Torah was ashamed. He was megamgam. That's the language of the Talmud. He was just like very stopping, and he just didn't feel comfortable really singing and sharing the Torah. Why? Because the context in the Talmud's talking about this is somebody who had sinned terribly with sexual deviance, wasn't committed to holiness, wasn't observing mitzvos correctly. And therefore, when this person came to the study hall, didn't feel comfortable davening, didn't feel comfortable learning Torah. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says something so beautiful. If you'll allow me, I want to share it in the exact language of the Talmud, and then of course I'll translate. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira looks at this child, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says, B'ni, my child, pasach picha v'ya'iru divarecha. Open up your mouth and allow the illumination and the light to come forth. The words of Torah and prayer cannot become impure. Just because what you did yesterday may not have been ideal, just because you may be mired in imperfections and sin and difficulty, should not be a barrier for your entry into religious life. That's not a reason that you can't start right now, because you are holy. And B'ni, my child, open up your mouth, pasach picha, open up your heart, open up your words, v'ya'iru divarecha. You have light and illumination and divinity inside of you, but you need to open up your heart and allow yourself to express it. Don't let yesterday prevent you from the divinity that lies in the present. Return, healing, and redemption is never impossible. It is always something attainable in that moment right before us. If only, B'ni, each of us realized, pasach picha, we have to open up our mouths, v'ya'iru divarecha. The divinity is within us if we only had the courage and responsibility to embrace the opportunity of the moment, to open up our mouths and hearts and express the divinity that resides within us. The reason why the Torah opens up, not with holiness and with great men, but it opens up with sin and with failure and with difficulty, is a reminder that this is how each of our lives open up. Each of our lives open up in the very beginning, where we have these hopes that we're going to lead these perfect lives where everything's going to unfold neatly and naturally, and life never works out that way. And each of us has a Garden of Eden that we feel like we've been banished from. Each of us has a paradise that we think that we're exiled from, that we're not worthy of. There's this beautiful Leonard Cohen song that says, there's a crack in everything, that's how the light gets in. It's in the very feelings of vulnerability and imperfection that we're able to bring our full selves into relationship with God and the divine idea. That we become vehicles not for perfection, but for perfecting, for the process towards perfection. Because that's ultimately our responsibility. Our responsibility is not to be perfect. Our responsibility is to bring a little bit more perfection to an imperfect world, to imperfect selves. The entire reason why we have religion and divinity in this world is not because we're perfect, it's not because the world is perfect. It's because our responsibility, our mission, is to take that one step closer in our lives and bring more light and more divinity to the world, to our communities, to our family, and to ourselves.